Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast. In this podcast, we go deep into mining news, hot topics, and live interviews with mining professionals and leading figures in the mining industry. Introducing your host, Rob Tyson, founder and director of Mining International and Mining International Executive, a leading global mining recruitment and headhunting agency.
Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast. And today's guest is Paul Ferneyhough, who's the Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer at Eldorado Gold Corporation, a listed gold and base metals producer, mining, development and exploration operations in Turkey, Canada and Greece. With a qualified chartered accountant and a degree in physics, Paul has over 20 years in the resourcing sector, specialising in finance, investor relations, strategy, commercial planning and business performance management. It's going to give us an overview of Eldorado Gold, update on their projects, how they're going to work with, or how they work with Indigenous communities, and what he's learned from being in the oil and gas industry, now obviously in the mining industry. He's also going to be attending and a part of a panel at the Resourcing Tomorrow event in December the 3rd to December the 5th in London, where he's going to be talking about redefining leadership for the energy transition. So we can speak a little bit more about that later in the podcast. If you want to attend the event, which I encourage you to, there's going to be a link in the description, accompanies podcast, where you can get a percentage off the tickets. So I encourage you to go and have a look and purchase your tickets, and hopefully see you there. And obviously Paul will be speaking as well. Paul, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Very well, Rob. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you for your time. And I just wonder if you can just tell us a little bit about your career. As I mentioned, you were and have been in the oil and gas previously. So I just wondered if you can just tell us a little bit about your career, how it's developed to what it is today, being obviously the Vice President and Chief Financial Officer at Eldorado Gold.
Sure, Rob. And it's kind of funny hearing you say Chief Financial Officer, because yes, I am a chartered accountant, but I spent most of my career sort of trying not to be an accountant at most times. But yeah, I left university with a degree in physics, sort of realizing that I think I'd reached my intellectual capacity at the third year of my physics course, and I needed to do something different. And I trained with Coopers & Lybrand, now part of PwC, as a chartered accountant. And I spent about 5 years working with Coopers & Lybrand. And at that point, I really felt like I didn't know how to run a business. And so I jumped from accountancy into industry, and in fact, into oil and gas, working for a smaller British company called Lasmo. And that was my sort of first real introduction to using the financial skills, the things that training as a chartered accountant had given me in a sort of broader strategy, planning and budgeting sense for an oil and gas company, for a resource company. I worked with Lasmo for about 5 years, a couple of those years in London, but I also spent just over 3 years living and working in Caracas, Venezuela, which as a first expatriate posting was quite the move, I can tell you, back then when I was sort of 27 years old. I stayed with Lasmo until they were taken over by E&I in 2001. And then in 2002, I moved to a Canadian company called Talisman Energy and took a role in Aberdeen. And again, not as a pure finance person, but really working in strategy, planning, economics, project assessment, things like that. Now, I stayed with Talisman all the way through to 2015, working twice in Aberdeen and twice in Calgary, and then finally making Calgary home for me and my family in about 2014. Now, Talisman got taken over in 2015 by a big Spanish oil and gas company called Repsol, and me and my family actually then were asked to move to Madrid, where I took on the role as treasurer and head of investor relations. And interestingly enough, I'd been sort of spending most of my career wanting to get the opportunity to run a big business in an industry where engineers generally run most of the big businesses. And to be fair, when I moved to Madrid, I didn't think that opportunity was going to come, and I was going to be a strict finance guy for the rest of my career. But in 2018, I was actually asked to return to Calgary and run Repsol's North American upstream oil and gas business, which was a dream job for me, and really sort of was the culmination of saying, yes, a humble accountant from the UK can actually run a big business in the resource sector. And I did that for about 3 years, and it really cemented in me what's required in leaders to run a business that's staffed with, several thousand people across different operations across a continent. And for me, I think it really was a very important part of the experience and the leadership that I now bring into the mining sector. I left Repsol in 2020 in the middle of COVID, and then joined Eldorado about 9 months later after having been introduced to George Burns, our CEO. And he asked me if I could come and help him grow the business. And I think the combination of financial but also business leadership that I was able to bring with me from my prior experiences really has been the foundation of me now coming into a different resource industry, but bringing ideas around capital discipline, around connecting the strategy of a company to what people do every day, and really helping a company intentionally deliver on the opportunities that it has in its portfolio. So I've been with Eldorado about 3 years now, 3.5 years, and I just took on the role as CFO, amongst a few other functions that I look after. That was at the beginning of this year. And I have to tell you, I very much enjoy working in another historic industry, gold having been even older than oil and gas. And I particularly enjoy working with all of the people at Eldorado as we are now successfully growing the company and getting it ready to be a much bigger, much more successful company over the coming years. And I know any of your listeners who are familiar with Eldorado, they will know that we're in the middle of a big investment project, which in fact is going to increase our production by something like 40% over the next 2 years. So transformational for us. But yeah, that's my journey, chasing down 30 years in the resource industry, actually in the next couple of years. But just a humble accountant who started in London and got to travel the world, basically.
Yeah, no, good to hear. I always ask this question for people that have been in the oil and gas industry and move over to the mining industry. What would you say, what are some of the skills and learnings that you've come across working in the oil and gas industry that you can actually bring to the mining industry? Because obviously they're two different industries, and you're seeing more and more executives from the oil and gas industry move over to mining. So what kind of, I suppose, qualities do you see people from that industry, oil and gas, bring into the mining industry?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things I think specific to Eldorado, in fact. Firstly, many oil and gas companies went through periods of very significant growth. And in fact, there was a real sort of issue that companies were just growing for growth's sake and not really thinking about returns. And I see a bit of that in the mining industry as well. And I think in particular for a gold or precious metals company like Eldorado, they just haven't had the same financial pressures that oil and gas companies had over the last 20 years with extremely low commodity prices for significant periods of time. And so what I learned and experienced around capital allocation, around performance management, around the setting of objectives to ensure that your business remains robust across whatever outcomes, the business has to face, is something which I think, and certainly I see, hasn't been taken on board as effectively in the precious metals mining sector as it has in oil and gas over the last 20, 25 years. So there's that. I think the second thing for me, as a leader that's come from a much bigger company, all processes, procedures, and just the right amount of systems and controls these things are essential for a growing company. You don't want to grow too fast without the ability to control, to understand where the business is. But you've also got to be very careful about not building in too much bureaucracy, too much process that isn't reflective of where the company is in its current sort of size or asset portfolio. And then I think the last thing is just this idea that we need to be getting ahead of the challenges around environment, climate change, and sustainability. I was really pleased to be joining an Eldorado that has, I think, an industry-leading approach to environment and sustainability. And these are things that the mining industry needs to take seriously. In oil and gas, almost 10, 15 years ago, the pressures were there, and they're still not as tough in the mining sector, but they are coming, and companies need to be ahead of that curve and able to respond. And certainly that was something that I worked a lot with in Repsol, where, again, that company was a leader in its sector around ESG. And so for me, it's very important that Eldorado is really focused on being on the front foot around everything to do with environment and sustainability in governance.
Yeah, we'll speak about ESG a bit later on in the podcast. But I wondered if you can give us an overview of Eldorado Gold. I think most of our listeners who are people from the mining industry will know of you and about you. But I just wondered if you can just give us a snapshot of the company.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So look, Eldorado's a precious metal miner focusing on gold. We're a fast-growing company, and we operate in 3 different parts of the world. So currently, we have a very nice operation in Val-d'Or, Quebec, in Canada. This is a mine called Lamaque that produces about 180,000 ounces of gold a year. We're just about to add a second mine called Ormac that's going to be developed in combination with Lamaque, which is going to give us something like 10 years of mine life there. And Lamaque is basically the biggest single producer for us at the moment. Second area of focus is Türkiye. So we have 2 mines in Türkiye. We have an open pit at Kışladağ, which is going to produce something like 170,000 ounces this year. It's a very, very efficient operation. And we produce Doré, which is generally sold in country. And then also in Türkiye, we have an underground polymetallic mine at Efemçukuru. That produces concentrate and roughly, I'd say, 75,000 ounces a year. Most of that gets exported from Türkiye. But the real foundation of Eldorado over the last sort of 5 to 10 years has been those 2 assets in Türkiye. And then finally, in Greece, we are the only precious metal miner in Greece at the moment. We have an operation at Olympias in the Halkidiki region of Greece. That produces around 70 to 80,000 ounces at full potential. This is a mine that we've been really focusing on improving productivities. And we've now got to the point where we feel comfortable enough to invest in an upgrade of our mill there to raise production throughput by about 20 to 25% over the next couple of years. And then finally in Greece, we have the Skouries mine, a mine that has been coming for 2 or 3 decades if you talk to enough people about it. We restarted construction. That mine was half built and was put in care and maintenance for a few years as we worked through some permitting issues. But we were able to restart the development of the Skouries mine last year with the support of the Greek government and a very forward-looking financing package with 2 of the Greek banks. And that's going to come into production sometime in the 3rd quarter next year. And we'll add something like 40% to our production volume per annum, as well as helping us drive down our unit costs. It's an incredibly efficient mine, and it's going to be basically the biggest asset in our portfolio when it comes on to production. So really, really exciting times for us. We also have exploration projects across Quebec and in northern Greece that we're looking to move forwards. And we're constantly looking at opportunities in Türkiye to add another mine there. We're one of the operators that feels very comfortable working with the government in that part of the world and believe that the industry has got more opportunity to expand in Türkiye, and we want to be part of that success story. So that's Eldorado in a nutshell.
Yeah. You and as you've just alluded to, you operate in, I suppose, some unique jurisdictions between obviously Canada, Greece, and Türkiye. What are some of the challenges that you face with each jurisdiction? And is there some commonalities between these jurisdictions, or are they pretty different?
Yeah, there are some similarities, but also definitely differences. I think the first one is, in terms of similarities, is the complexity around permitting processes. Now, like any resource industry, we have to demonstrate that we can operate safely and within the appropriate regulations and laws in the country. And the permitting environment is one of the key tools that regulators and governments have. And so, what we find is our staff on the ground in each of those areas, we need to have people that are experts in understanding that pathway to ensure that you've got appropriate permitting, not only for day-to-day operations, but also as and when you're developing projects, that you don't get held up, that you don't have to stop, put down your tools and incur, additional costs because you can't move forwards because we didn't understand that we needed a particular permit. So that's something that I find is a similarity across each of our areas. We're particularly good at navigating the sort of shark-infested permitting waters in Türkiye and in Quebec, in and around Val d'Or. Greece, I think, it does have additional complexities around permitting. And with us going through the construction at Skouries, we were able to successfully restart, but making sure we're on top of, in particular, if you have any archaeological findings as you're developing, these are things that you have to treat very sensitively. You have to involve the government, and you have to get the right approvals to even continue to work if something happens in that area. And we've got, again, local staff who are very, very good about that. I think the other similarity is around our partnerships with local communities. We want to be operating in places where people want us. We don't want to be building mines just because we've got a permit, even if we don't have, social license. And so in Quebec, in Türkiye, in Greece, we really focus on what is our impact, both environmentally and socially and economically, in those local areas. We prefer to employ local people as much as we can, especially in our operating assets. It's not always possible during construction because you're having to bring in people with specialist skills. But our relationship with those local communities, investing in those local communities, helping them benefit from the economic prosperity that having a mine in their area can bring, is really important. And it's just as important in Quebec as it is in Türkiye and as it is in Greece. And so our partnership with those local communities and making sure that both directly and indirectly they are benefiting, and then ensuring that our environmental footprint is as sensitive as possible, and that we have plans to ensure that once we're finished and gone, it's almost like we were never there, is really important. And that's consistent across the three countries we operate in. And back when I was in oil and gas, and I think I visited 30 odd countries across the world where companies I was working for had operations, it was exactly the same. Those partnerships are fundamental. And it's all about listening to what is important for the people that live and work in and around where we operate.
Yeah. You're able to secure financing for your copper gold Skouries project in Greece through some obviously unique sources. You had two Greek banks and the European Bank for reconstruction and development among them. How did that come about? And also, what is the relationship like today, which obviously you've built up?
Yeah, it was a bit of a journey. I have to say, it took us sort of almost a couple of years from when I joined Eldorado to get that financing package in place. But, once we had the appropriate permitting for the Skouries mine, Eldorado as a company was looking at what was effectively going to be $1 billion investment. And our balance sheet just couldn't hold that investment, when we were getting started. And so we were looking at what would be the best way for us to be able to drive this forward. And we were looking at selling a portion of it. We were looking at streaming arrangements. We were looking at various financing packages. And whilst the executive team were in Athens, we got introduced to the four, let's call them the four fundamental banks in the Greek banking system. And these are banks that over the last few years had gone through difficult times, but had come through them with the support of the government, and were really looking to up the amount of money that they had invested, and they were able to invest. And our project was very, very attractive because of the size and the amount of money that it was required. And so with the backing of the government, we were encouraged to open negotiations with at least a couple of the banks. And in fact, that was National Bank of Greece and Piraeus. And it just seemed that we were able to build a partnership at exactly the right moment. And so over the course of several months of negotiating financing agreement, we built really strong professional connections with two banks that were focused on investing in Greece, investing in Greek industry, and investing in projects that had a long future. And so it was a real sweet spot in terms of what we needed and what they were trying to do. And that meant we were able to negotiate a pretty unique project financing deal. The banks, in fact, put up 80% of the capital required for the investment, which is somewhat unheard of in project financing. And we had, a few unique features built into the agreement. It had an automatic cost overrun facility if we needed it. It has the ability to defer initial payments if we, find that ramp up takes a little bit longer once we start producing. These are things that you normally have to go back and negotiate when you're in the middle of a project, but we were able to get those in place right up front. And then I think the other thing that was important is we, Eldorado as a company, made significant commitment to our environmental and social footprint, basically in line with what was required for investments that would be supported by the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development. And this was because the Greek banks felt that that was the right standard to be applied to the Skouries project. Now, the benefit of that was, after we had secured the Greek financing, EBRD, who were also very keen on the Skouries mine as something that's quite important to the EU. Copper is a strategic and critical mineral, and the mine is within the EU borders. And with our commitment to how we were going to operate both environmentally and socially, EBRD felt that they could invest directly into the Skouries mine by taking an equity position in Eldorado and then asking us to direct that investment down to the mine. And so this means we have partnership with Greek banks, we have a partnership with EBRD, clearly we have a partnership with the government in Greece, and partnerships like that are what's required to make mines like Skouries really successful. And I think that means we have a unique arrangement there in Greece that all of us are happy to participate in. And you were asking me about the relationship. I can tell you the relationship with our banks is fantastic. I was there in Athens just a few weeks ago, catching up with them, giving them a briefing on where we are with the project. And just last week, we hosted some of our key staff from our banking partners at Skouries for their own visit to see where their money is being invested from the project financing. And I think they feel they're involved in a flagship project in Greece, and they're very proud of it. And we're very proud of our partnership with them as well.
Yeah, good to hear. How does the company prioritise their sustainability and responsible mining, and obviously with regards to its financial strategy?
Yeah, so, sustainability is at the heart of everything we do. So we have a system called SIMS, which is a Sustainability Integrated Management System. And that system is used to identify and ensure that we are properly meeting all of our sustainability requirements from whatever authority or, supervisory group we capture all of our obligations in that system. And then that system, through its data management, its ability to report, then allows us to also audit against those requirements. And so this means we can ensure that we are meeting the very highest requirements as they're laid out wherever we are operating in the world, and that our system makes sure that we not only understand them, but we also get them done. We record our compliance with all of our obligations, and then we have them in a manner that's auditable over time so that we can confirm that to any external parties as well as our internal leadership. Now, as far as investment is concerned, this means that the way we design our projects and how we invest in them have to meet the highest sustainability targets that we are set. And so one example of that is, in fact, at Skouries, where when the mine was put into care and maintenance and we were, going through the design ahead of restarting, we actually changed the tailings design from a wet slurry to dry stack tailings. Now, this comes with increased cost, but it's a cost that we think is essential. And we believe, things like dry stack tailings should be the only way to operate and build new mines. And so that's something that we're committed to, and it means it competes for capital. We're just not prepared to design mines that don't use technology such as dry stack tailings. And the advantage of, some of the advantages of dry stack tailings include less chance of failure in the storage facility. But it also means that when you're finished, those tailings are ready to be remediated almost instantly because there isn't a liquid issue. And so we can revegetate as we go, meaning once the mine is finished and we're exiting the area, the ability to remediate where we're operating is far simpler. And so overall, we think things like dry stack tailings are incredibly important to how we operate today. And that's a really good example of how sustainability investment in the environment, investment in operating in the very best level of standards competes for capital within Eldorado.
I think you mentioned in the introduction that obviously you're the CFO, but you've got you're wearing other hats as well. But you're also the Chief Human Resources Officer. What do you see as the role of HR in building obviously partnerships and engaging with local communities, especially within the certain jurisdictions that Eldorado are currently operating in?
Yes, taking on leadership of the HR function has been a new role for me this year, and it's certainly a very enjoyable distraction from my sort of more normal set of experiences. I'm very lucky we have an excellent HR team based not only in Vancouver at our head office, but at all of our operations across the globe. Now, the human resources team, their sort of fundamental reason to be is the management of human capital in our business. And that means that, our employees are partners with us as well. They are an essential part of Eldorado and what we do every day. And so the human resources function isn't just about making sure that people get paid. It's making sure that people are getting the appropriate training. It's making sure that people are getting the appropriate benefits that support them both in their role, but also their very valuable roles for their families, supporting their families as well. And so, the HR team are constantly in dialogue with our employees to make sure that we've got a great partnership. Sometimes these things get a little strained. We just went through a union collective bargaining agreement process in Greece. These things can flare up tensions and emotions. But over the period of a sort of 3 or 4 months, we were able to work through with HR being intimately involved. What's important for the unions? What's important for their members? And how does that fit with a sustainable long-term business, in this case in Greece? And how do we then reflect that in a modernized, updated collective bargaining agreement, which will then take us through another 3 years and in fact cover the period that Skouries comes into production. So HR participating in those conversations, listening to what's important. And, I think people forget about listening sometimes, not just in resource industries, but in industry in general. Being able to take the time to listen to what's important, reconcile it with what the company needs, and ensure that our employees feel like partners is just a really important way that we're able to operate effectively.
Yeah. Well, hopefully our audience are listening to what you're saying. So I thought I'd just add that. Obviously, communities and obviously, as you just explained, support are obviously paramount today to get obviously things built to be successful long-term operator, which obviously help Eldorado are looking to achieve. What is your approach to obviously the communities within the company? And has it been successful in achieving positive outcomes for obviously both stakeholders and for the company?
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of different points that's worth thinking about. Firstly, I'll start in Quebec. Like many industrial concerns across Canada, we operate in areas and on lands that historically have been Indigenous lands. And, we have Indigenous communities in and around us in the Val-d'Or area. And they have various unique requirements and support that we're able to provide. And, one of the things that we sort of focus on is looking at those communities and saying, look, where can we help you with things like education, with things like medical facilities, and also in very specific circumstances. For example, last year in 23, there were some incredibly serious wildfires in Quebec that threatened the safety and integrity of the Indigenous communities that are near our mining site. And so helping them with heavy equipment, helping them with making sure that they've got appropriate firefighting equipment available to them is an example where we sort of listen to what's required and make sure that we are supporting those communities because of the fact that we operate on Indigenous lands. Now, when you look at Greece and you look at Turkey, as well as, let's say, the community of Val-d'Or around our Quebec operations, working with local communities to bring in as many local employees as possible, and we like to have, in excess of our employees, 90% of them should be local at least, if not more. It's important to say, look, how can we help people get the skills? And we've had success stories. Up in FM Türkiye, which is our underground mine in the hills above Izmir in Türkiye, when we first arrived there, the local communities were really concerned that we were going to impact their agricultural lifestyles. They were growing grapes on the ground up in the hills there, table grapes. And, when they saw that we were going to be putting a mine in that part of Türkiye, they were concerned that the water supplies were going to be impacted or their whole way of life was going to be lost. Now, what we were able to do by investing in grape production in that part of the world was to demonstrate, how they could grow grapes more effectively. We taught them how to string them up on trellises and actually make them into grapes that could be used for wine, not just for table grapes. But we were also able to show them how their farms, their agricultural concerns could exist and, side to side with our mine, the fact that we weren't going to have an impact on the water supply and the fact that our operations were not going to stop them from following their livelihoods. The other thing that we were able to do there is invest in local education. A lot of children weren't getting through all of their high school education. And so we invested in that. And I'm really pleased to say we've got examples of people, of children that went through the education system, went away to university, and then came back as engineers and are working in our facility. And that's just so great. When you speak to those engineers, they're so happy that they were able to come back and work in and around their local community, but with, a higher education that's given them professional skills for life. And working with the community in that way is just an essential part of demonstrating that our mining, our precious metal mining, can exist hand in hand with local communities that have been there for, forever.
Yeah. Certainly. As I mentioned in the introduction, you're going to be speaking at the upcoming Resourcing Tomorrow event, which is in London at the beginning of December. And the topic, you're going to be part of a panel. The topic is redefining leadership for the energy transition. I just wonder if you can just tell us a little bit about that and what kind of subjects you'll be covering.
Yeah, no, there's it's going to be quite a good discussion, I think. We've got a good panel for the Tuesday there. And really, it's sort of saying, look, what is it that we need to be thinking about as leaders, as our companies navigate the challenge of energy transition? And, at some of the simplest levels, it's like, how can we become more efficient? How do we give our people the skills to say, these are the ways that we can operate that's going to use either less power or it's going to generate lower levels of greenhouse gas emissions. So it's changing the skill sets that our staff, our operators need to get them to think about what's our role in helping manage the changes that are coming as we think about energy transition. At a portfolio level, it's around saying, look, things like copper are extremely important as part of the transition. And if we can find and develop copper, for example, within the EU boundaries, that's something that as a company, it's going to be very advantageous to us and very advantageous to the European Union and our shareholders. So in fact, all of the stakeholders. I think the other thing is it's around helping our staff understand what learning to lead collaboratively is about. And I don't mean just collaborating within the company, but collaborating with other companies so that when we are bringing contractors or we're bringing service providers into our business, that we're also working with them to set a culture that says, look, as a business, we need to be focused on our impact on the planet, and we need to be focused as to our role within energy transition here. And so it's just around how leadership is changing, how we speak to and work with our staff, how we speak to and work with our stakeholders. And I think that's what we're going to get into in that panel.
Yeah. Before we conclude, I just wonder if there was any other advice that you'd like to share with others and our audience within the industry. Or most of the listeners to this podcast are people within our industry, and also service providers as well. So yeah, just wonder if there was anything else that you would like to share with our listeners.
Yeah, I think I'd like to sort of share a message with people who are just coming into the industry, people who are in the early stages of their career. I took a big risk. Well, me and my wife, actually. In fact, she probably took an even bigger risk. But we took a big risk by moving to Venezuela very early in our careers. And it was an opportunity that I could have turned down. I could have said, well, that's a long way away. It's a very, different place to live. But we took a chance on it and we grabbed that opportunity with both hands and sort of just stepped into the unknown. And it completely changed our lives and it completely changed my professional career. And so I would say to people coming into our industry and young people coming in to jobs in the industry, this is one of those industries where if you want to go and experience things outside of the 10 or 20 kilometers around where you live, there's an opportunity. And I've always worked with the sort of thought process that says, if an opportunity comes up, grab it with both hands, see what happens, take a chance, because it can completely change your life. And for me, the opportunities that I've had working in, I think I said maybe 30, 35 different countries over my career so far have completely changed who I am professionally and in fact personally, and I think for the better. And so I encourage people when they're thinking about, should I take that chance? Take the chance. It'll change your life.
Yeah, certainly. And I suppose it's not necessarily just the younger generation. It is to the older generation as well. No matter what age you are, if you've got the opportunity and it looks good, then like you said, take it, grab it with both hands. Yeah, certainly. And lastly, and concluding, just wondering if you can just give us a outlook of the company over the sort of medium to long term, and obviously the company's strategic goals.
Yeah, of course. Eldorado is a growing company. The Skouries project, which is going to come into production in the third quarter next year, has really unlocked for us this idea of growth. And Skouries alone is going to grow our company by 40% in terms of gold production in the next 2 to 3 years. But that's just the first step. We have another shovel-ready project in northern Greece, plus really exciting exploration. In fact, more copper gold porphyry deposits that we're interested in bringing forwards. And it's not just in Greece. In Quebec, and in fact across Canada, we have exciting exploration prospectivity that we are moving forwards. We have a second mine in Val d'Or at Ormac that's going to see its maiden reserve at the end of this year and then come into production maybe 18 months after that, full production. And in Türkiye, we have exciting exploration prospectivity at Hodmaden North, just near the existing Hodmaden development. And we're constantly looking for opportunities to add in a country where we feel very comfortable operating. So Eldorado is all about a company that has built its shelf balance sheet strength, has a portfolio of growth opportunities, and is looking to be a growing, more efficient, more effective company over the coming years. It's a very, very exciting time to be working, I think, in precious metals, but also in Eldorado.
Yeah, great. Paul, thank you for your time. Really appreciate you sharing your story, telling us about Eldorado Gold, obviously discussing where you're operating or the company's operating in Türkiye, Greece and Canada, and sharing obviously your insights to what you're doing as a company with ESG and working obviously with local communities. So I know our audience like to hear those positive messages. If they want to reach out to you, if they want to follow the company's story, what social media platform channels yourself and the company on?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the primary one. So you'll find that Eldorado has a profile on there. And myself as well, and certainly people can contact me through there. The other way is through our website, www.eldoradogold.com, and there are communication channels on that website that would allow you to reach out. But always happy to hear from people. And yeah, LinkedIn's the biggest one, I'd say.
Yeah, no worries. We'll include those in the show notes accompanying this for easy access. So thank you for your time again, Paul. And hopefully you'll be able to come onto the podcast maybe sometime during next year and give us an update on the company.
Maybe after we start production, That's curious.
Yeah,
that could be.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed that episode. As I mentioned in the introduction, Paul's going to be speaking at the upcoming Resourcing Tomorrow event at the beginning of December in London. For details, I will include those in the show notes accompanying this, where there'll be a link to get discounted tickets, where you'll be able to obviously see Paul on stage as part of the panel, and also it's great networking opportunities for anyone in the mining industry, meeting like-minded mining professionals in a nice environment, and hear obviously talk about Eldorado and other companies at the event. So I encourage you to click on the link and buy a ticket. Please, as always, keep sharing these episodes far and wide. As I always say, we don't just need to share these episodes with people within our mining industry. Please share them with people outside of mining, so people outside of mining understand what mining is about, and what we do and what we bring to the table and what we bring to society. Because I think people outside of our industry are really unaware of what mining is about. And by sharing these episodes, hopefully we're educating the non-mining people. So thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed that episode. And until next time, happy mining.
Thank you for listening. Remember to reach out to Rob via the show notes and be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, happy mining, helping each other to improve the mining industry.